This is the Team Blaney podcast.
Let's go race for a championship.
Well, Steve, we're excited to welcome the latest member of the number 12 pit crew, Keiston France, Ryan Blaney's new front tire changer, here to the Team Blaney podcast. Keiston, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
As we just mentioned, you're the newest member of the pit crew. There's a shakeup in the last few weeks on the team. And so you've had an opportunity basically since the break in the season, the one lone week break that we've had, to get acclimated to this new team. So we thought it was a perfect time, a few races in to your tenure on the 12 car, to bring you in and let all of our viewers and listeners know a little bit more about you. So let's get right to it.
All right, right on.
So first off, we've talked to basically all the other members of the crew, and a majority of them were former collegiate or professional athletes. Now, rear tire changer came up more through the mechanic side and everything. Yeah. But we do know you have a background in athletics from high school all the way through college. So can you talk about your experience growing up as an athlete, the sports you played, and kind of what level you rose to?
Okay, well, my first love was actually football. My father coached football for, I want to say, almost 30 years. And when you're around it, I heard Denzel Washington once say, hang around the barbershop long enough, eventually you're going to get a haircut, right? So just hanging around that atmosphere, the love of football just worked its way into my life. And so I actually started playing football at the age of 5, but I picked up a tennis racket at the age of 7. And I went to war with the wall, if you know what I mean. And so and the rest is history on that. So coming up through high school, I played 3 sports: football in the fall, I ran indoor track in the winter, and then I played tennis in the spring. And I did that all the way through from basically K through 12, if you want to look at it that way. And going on from there, graduating in 2013 from high school, I started in the community college space, but quickly was able to obtain an opportunity at a university, on the university level, at an HBCU by the name of North Carolina A&T State University. There, I received a walk-on opportunity, a preferred walk-on opportunity. And if someone doesn't know the difference between a walk-on and preferred walk-ons get a little bit better special treatment, if that makes sense, right? I mean, we're still considered a walk-on, but the team is they've established somewhat their rosters, but they're looking to maybe add 1 or 2 more guys, so you have to battle it out. But they prefer you over a regular walk-on. So North Carolina A&T gave me an opportunity to come on board as a preferred walk-on, and eventually I earned a little bit of some scholarship money doing that. I transferred to A&T my sophomore year, and actually North Carolina A&T had regurgitated their program at that time. They had been defunct since, I want to say, 2004 with a winning record. But tennis is not a revenue sport. So it was one of the sports to get cut, swimming, tennis, even sometimes baseball. Sports like that do not make a lot of money at the gate will cut if the university may be struggling in certain areas. But anyway, back by popular demand, the alumni, we arose back to campus and had my tryouts and things of that nature, and ended up making the team, and eventually became the team captain by junior year. So there you have that. We went on to competing for 2 MEAC championships. And going on from there, I mean, I don't want to go too far. I know you wanted to stay in the athletic space, but speaking of Steve Price, I'm assuming that's who you're talking about, coming from the mechanic side. I also have some experience on the mechanical side as well. It's very rare in this era of pit crewmen, but I did have a little bit of experience there as well. And we can unpack that whenever you guys are ready for it. But staying on the sports side, I grew up an athlete my whole life, training, lifting weights, working out, seeing it from my dad's side of the world, being a defensive coordinator. He was my defensive coordinator, So that was interesting. he was dad at home and, coach on the field. And if you follow Deion Sanders in that situation, it's an interesting deal, right? You want him to be dad when he's coaching you, but he has to separate that, right? So that was fun. And then getting to college and learning a lot there, and again, traveling and experiencing was pretty cool. So that's pretty much my athletic history per se. And so, yeah. And then obviously flowing into what I do now,
So I mentioned, a lot of these athletes that are now on pit crews were recruited there. Some of them had recruiters that show up at, pro day and kind of put a bug in the air, like, hey, if you don't make it to the pros, you don't do this, well, here's my card, why don't you consider us?
Right.
And that's their first understanding of what NASCAR is.
Yeah.
You are originally from Virginia, which is a hotbed for racing, multiple NASCAR, sanctioned tracks in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, did you grow up with a connection to the sport? Maybe unlike some of your other fellow pit crew members, where this was something you knew about or had a passion before even getting onto the crew.
Yeah. So being from Amelia, Virginia, probably never heard of it. It's probably about 15 to 20 minutes from Chesterfield, Hamlin country, right? Let me back up. My father's from Martinsville, Virginia, right? And so obviously that's home to one of NASCAR's favorite tracks, right? Or fan favorite track, whatnot. So him growing up, my grandfather was into racing, right? He came up watching the Wood Brothers, being in that area, actually remembering when the Wood Brothers came to be, right? And so he was always a Wood Brothers fan, a Ford guy. And it just trickled down into, through my lineage from my grandfather. Then my grandfather got my father into it, my uncles and things like that. He would take them to Martinsville when they would race out that way. So they fell in love with it. My dad fell in love with it at a young age. And then obviously it hit me. So I grew up a fan of the sport. If I can recall, the first ever race that that maybe listened to or even watched, I want to say more so listened to, if I can remember, was the 2001 Daytona race where Earnhardt unfortunately lost his life. So a way to be introduced to motorsports, right? But I was so young. I mean, I vaguely remember that. I think we were actually traveling from Martinsville at that time, the way my dad explained it, and we had it over the radio, or we were watching it in Martinsville. We left and then tuned into the radio and learned of his passing. Nevertheless, around 6 or 7 is when I was introduced to the world of racing. And from there, I was hooked. And so I came up as a fan, most certainly. And because of that, I became a junior fan. And I think my first, I want to say 24 scale or 64 scale car was the number 8. And also the 2003 NASCAR video game, which had Junior on the cover of it. So grew up a Junior fan, Junior Nation, and always wanted to be involved in motorsports. Didn't quite know how I would do that. At first, I wanted to work in the shop, maybe work a CNC machine or something like that. I don't know. Fabricate, work a fabricator in fabrication. Wasn't too sure of that. Meanwhile, I'm still gaining an interest in film. So I have two loves that are growing inside of me in young Keiston. And but pertaining to racing, I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I want to say I got to maybe the 10th, 9th grade or so, 8th or 9th grade, I learned that NASCAR utilized athletes on pit road. And being that I was an athlete, I was like, wow, I would definitely love to do that, right? The love for mechanics faded away, as time progressed, and I learned more about pit stops, more of the world of pit road. And my father took me to my very first race in 2006. That was the Coca-Cola 600. That's when they had the full grandstands on the back stretch, right? And that was amazing. We sat between turns 1 and 2 all the way at the top, it was myself, my father, and one of his colleagues from work. And for some reason, I remember Dale Jarrett spitting out on maybe the first lap or two going into turn 4. I don't know how I remember that why I remember that so vividly, but I just remember that old 88 car spitting out. Dale Jarrett is tuning in. Sorry, no offense to you, man. But I just remember that. That was the first experience in person of NASCAR, right? And I remember, obviously being a huge fan of cars. They had that set up there. And, I think I still have some pictures. I think I should have sent those to you guys. I don't know. They embarrassed me live or during the recording. But that was my first experience. And, again, the addiction continued to grow. The smell of the fuel, the tires, the sound. It was amazing. So anyway, moving back to 8th and 9th grade, learning about athletes being involved with motorsports, I started to do some research, right? I'm big on research, big on trying to educate myself, on things that I am interested in. So I learned of this program by the name of Drive for Diversity. And, learning of the names like Cal Larson, like Bubba Wallace, like Daniel Suarez, who at that time they were just coming through, but learning of some interesting Haley Deegan, interesting names that were, being trained up by this program, I found every way possible to try to get in touch. However, at that time, my father and I, we had progressed from sitting in the stands to actually getting access to pit road. So it was one year that they were in Martinsville, and I think I was at prom or something of that nature. And but my father still attended, and he went on pit road, and he asked one of the guys, "Hey, listen, my son is interested in doing this. How in the world can he get involved? Right? How in the world can he get involved?" And he gave my father a number of an individual by the name of Phil Horton, who was over the pit crew development and the driver development a little bit as well, alongside Max Siegel, who was the president of DEI, if you're familiar with that name back in the day. And so he gave my father that number. My father gave me that number, and from there it was up to me, right? A small kid from Amelia, Virginia. You want to try to pursue your dream, you have a direct contact. So anyway, I reached out to Phil Horton, and I told him, I said, "Hey, I want to change tires for a living. How can I do that?" He said, "Well, you gotta come on down to North Carolina." And he was the only one to tell me that. Kenyatta Houston, if you know of that name in the industry, I met him on pit road one year and became somewhat good friends with him and drilled him. I was like, "Man, how in the world do I do this?" He said, "Well, first you got to move to North Carolina." Right. And I said, "Okay, that'll be step one." So Phil Horton told me that. He was like, "Well, move to North Carolina, and really you can basically start the day if you want to. Come on down here." I was like, "Well, Coach, I kind of want to pursue, some college goals. I would love to play sports in college. Just let me get through my 4 years." By this time, I was a senior in high school. I said, "Just let me get through my 4 years, and I'll give you a call." He didn't believe me. He was like, "Well, what sport are you playing?" I said, "Tennis." Right. And the misconception is that tennis players, aren't strong. They don't like to get dirty. Things of that nature. Were soft, whatever. Obviously, it's not football, right? But I always tell Coach Horton, even to this day, I still have a football background. Okay. Tennis helped pay a little bit of my education, but I have football in my veins as well. I'm not saying they were wrong, but so anyway, 4 years later, I get through college, and if I'm moving a little too fast, just stop me.
Oh, you're great.
Get through college, I called Phil Horton. I said, "Hey, I'm done, right? And I'm ready to come and join the program." I will say my senior year of college, let me slow down actually. Phil Horton actually was on my campus, and he was recruiting. And he did a little combine there. I was away at a match. I think we were playing I think we were actually playing Duke that day. Duke, we were doing a doubleheader with Duke and then Western Carolina. What a day, right? And so I was able to compete in the combine. However, Horton already knew who I was, right? And by the time I graduated, I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. And he was like, man, I didn't believe you. He was like, are you sure? I was like, yes, I want to do this. And so I did not do – so the way Draft Diversity works, they would go out to so many universities, Arizona State, wherever, West Coast, East Coast. They'll go down to Florida, Kansas, and they'll recruit athletes. They'll put on a little combine or they'll show up to pro day, right? Check the guys out. If they like whoever they like, they invite them, so on and so forth, give them a test individually. Then what they would do is invite, I'll say about 20 guys out to a national, what they call a national combine in Concord, North Carolina at the R&D Center, right? So it'll be a mixture of collegiate athletes and pro athletes who just couldn't hack it or cut or something happened. It'll be a mixture of us and them, and we'll have that, right? They'll have their drills, their skill drills, and then, do something on the race car, whatever, see how quickly we can pick up information, retain it, apply it to a pit stop right there in front of news reporters, cameras, newspaper, everyone, right? You have recruiters from different teams, well, all of the teams. So you have Hendrick, Penske, you have Roush at the time when I tried out Ganassi, which is now Trackhouse. You have Hoss at the time when they were there. So they did everything they could to not only just expose us to what the flip is racing, what is this NASCAR thing, but put us in the front of the eyes, almost resembled it to an NFL combine in a way, right? Just had their NASCAR pit crew twist on it. Okay, so anyway, I skipped the little individual workouts, and Coach Horton invited me to the National Combine, right? At this point, I kind of have a chip on my shoulder because I'm tired of people saying that tennis players are too weak, things of that nature, ignoring the fact that we have great left to right ability, explosion ability, hand and eye coordination. I mean, we're still athletes here, right? Change of direction, that's what I was trying to think of. Great change of direction ability. I mean, all of that's there. We're not trained to have the biggest biceps and triceps in the game, right? It would be counterproductive for a ground stroke, right? But anyway, nevertheless, we're athletes. So I was there to prove to them that this little old tennis guy is just as athletic as your NFL guy that just played for the Redskins at the time, now the Commanders, right? I can hang with them. And so needless to say, I went into that combine and won the whole combine, right? And everyone was somewhat appalled by that. And I received all of the interviews. In every interview, it was like, oh, didn't you play college tennis? I'm like, yeah, I played college tennis. Does it matter? I never said that on the interview. But just saying, everyone was surprised that a tennis player amongst giants, if you will, could sustain himself. So that's my story. So anyway, did the combine, was selected. They do the combine just about every year, the week leading up to, or the weekend. Yeah, the week leading up to the Coke 600, so Memorial Day weekend at the R&D Center. And so anyway, we go through a selection process via that, and we're brought in during the month of September to train. They pay for our housing, give us a little stipend for food, things of that nature. And then hopefully by that February, we'll be somewhat ready. And if we haven't been picked up by a bigger team, we go on as what they call independent contractors, right? So we're kind of sourced out to different teams every weekend. You don't know who you're pitting for. Just know you're pitting. But it was a way of gaining some experience. If you were blessed enough to obtain an opportunity with a bigger team, then they would develop you there. In my case, later I had came into contact with some coaches at Chip Ganassi, and I want to say maybe let me see, when did I come in? 2018, late 2018, somewhere in 2019, mid 2019, I was brought on board by Chip Ganassi and started to develop with them. Right. So, but if that wasn't your destiny at the time immediately, then you continue as an independent contractor, trying out for bigger teams, driving everywhere. Dare I say, maybe it's the side of motorsports people don't really know about too much, especially on the pit crew side if you were brought straight into a big team. Yeah, you're grinding it out. And so I spent a lot of time doing that. I've driven to California, Vegas, Phoenix a lot of times. In the back of a 12-passenger van, right? Iowa, doing double headers. We do a race in Pocono, hop in a van and go to Iowa or something, So I've been on that side, and looking at that now, and I'll kind of pause here so we don't get too far into the future of this story. It made me really appreciate where I am now. Right. And I'm not talking against the guys that were blessed to come straight in and never have to experience driving to Florida for the Daytona 500. You have it changes your perspective on a lot of things. You appreciate if the flight doesn't take off immediately. Right. I've told guys plenty of times, would you rather who've complained about a flight being too long or sitting on the plane because one of our teams won too long? Would you rather drive? Because I know people who are driving back home now. Or would you rather take this flight and, don't have to worry about that stressing your body out, sitting in a van. But anyway, I'll stop there. And okay. All right. Where are we, guys? Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, because one more little sports thing. So you played football in high school, you tennis at a collegiate level, high level, playing like Duke, places like that. We've asked other guys on the team, if they ever ran across like a professional athlete and got to go against, like even Trevor, we found out sacked Josh Allen in a bowl game.
Yeah.
So did you ever run across, like either in tennis or when you were in the high school ranks, do you ever run against anybody who ended up on a professional level?
Oh man, I'm glad you asked that. It reminds me. Chris Eubanks, he plays professional tennis now. He was actually on the Olympic team, right? Chris Eubanks, I played against him in doubles at Georgia Tech. He's a tall glass of water, probably weighs 130 pounds. But the guy, his racket is stringed up with pit gut. And, the inner liner of I'm sorry, not pit gut, cow gut, excuse me. Cow gut, get it right, Keiston. Shucks. And that's probably the toughest string that you'll use based on your top spin, how much spin you put on the ball. The more spin you put on the ball, the more the strings move. More strings move, the more they'll wear out and pop. So cow gut is probably the strongest type of string to use, but he played with that. But I had an opportunity of playing against Chris Eubanks, best 2 out of 3 sets at Georgia Tech. He was a phenom there, and obviously goes on to, playing in the U.S. Open, making it to the semis, the Australian Open. I mean, he's on the circuit. He's ranked, I want to say top 100 in the world, I believe, but made the U.S. Olympic team. He did not go far in that tournament. However, just achieving that is a feat within itself. So as a player, that's the only, him, and it was another guy as well, but he didn't make it as far. But that's when it comes to notable figures in the tennis world, and maybe even outside of that, that's the only name that I've ran across. Now, when I was in high school, if I don't know when you guys were born, but we had a connection to the Gray family. It was a football player by the name of Mel Gray. He was a returner for the Detroit Lions, I think in the 80s.
Late 70s or 80s, yeah.
Late 70s or 80s. His brother, who I call him Mr. Gray, but his brother, he's a pastor now. He played for the New York Giants. He was a cornerback. I cannot think of his first name. Nevertheless, when it comes to other pro athletes that I've been able to run up into, the Grays, again, Mel Gray being, I'd say, the more famous Gray of the two. He came in and gave us pregame speech, and I think he was an advisor or somewhat of that nature. But anyway, he had an involvement with our program back in high school in some way. Definitely his brother coached us before I played, but he coached my high school for many years with my father. And so, and I'm trying to think of anyone else, but I can't come to mind right now. But yeah, so that's all that I could think of when it comes to coming into contact with athletes who had either been in the pros or who were on their way, So yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about you went to Ganassi to kind of be a part of their program and train with their program, but you're also independently working for some of these other teams along the way. You worked with Jennifer Jo Cobb's team, you worked with MBM Motorsports and stuff. So, and now you've been to Ganassi Trackhouse and you've been to Penske. Can you tell the fans a little bit, like what are some of the differences and maybe expectations? You said travel and stuff is way different. You're in vans instead of jets, but those differences between the super hyper small teams versus a Goliath like Penske or Trackhouse.
I'll back up even further. I honestly got my very first start as an intern with Obiker Racing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Obiker Racing. Dubbed as the first, African-owned race team in NASCAR, right? He gave me Victor Obiker. I have to shout him out. He gave me my very first opportunity as an intern, as a social media intern or media intern in general. So I have to give thanks to him as well. He's no longer in the sport. But Obiker, Jennifer Jo Cobb, she gave me a shot too. So to your question, the differences, man, I mean, it's a blessing, to be a part of them as well. Obviously, the funding is the largest difference, right? Not every owner comes into the world of NASCAR, rich, multi-millionaires, multi-billionaires, right? Roger Penske having Penske Trucking, Rick Hendrick having the dealerships, right? Jack Roush being involved with Ford in a major way. Chip, I mean, just, an anomaly in the IndyCar world, right? I mean, not everyone is blessed with that. Carl longtime, driver himself, right? He came into it with what he had, right? And he's still doing it to this day. Jen Jo Cobb, obviously a driver too. She still does it, I believe, likely, coming into it as a driver, but just not given the opportunity to really do it on a high level. She came in with what she could afford. And who else did we mention? MBM, Jen Jo Cobb, Obiker. Obiker came into it. I mean, he had a law firm out in his country and stuff like that, but just wasn't willing to put up as much money. But again, like, not everyone, whether it was willing or just didn't have it, doesn't come into it, as, I don't want to say privileged, but just with the backing, right? And so a lot of times when teams like Penske or Hendrick is flying to a Bristol or to a Florida, those seats are expensive, along the lines of $1,000 to $3,000 a seat if you're renting a jet. But like a Penske, like a Coach Gibbs, like a Hendrick, that have their own planes, which I'm sure it's a fee to that also, jet fuel, things you got to pay, pilots and stuff like that. If you don't have that, I mean, it's highly expensive. So more so teams will rather pay the expense of filling up a van and driving across country, right? It's just cheaper. So instead of private flights, you're driving everywhere, right? You're driving. Now, some teams will have a little bit of grace and they'll find a commercial flight for you to the West Coast, right? And they may book a hotel and you may have to stay on the West Coast for a month. I remember when I was with MBM, when we did that West Coast swing at the top of the year, we didn't fly back. We stayed. I forgot the route. I think it was it Vegas? No, Phoenix, California, then Vegas. Whatever order that was. We ended up actually staying out there because he couldn't have, I'm not saying he couldn't afford it. He just wasn't willing to do that at the time, because again, you're trying to cycle all of your winnings from times past and what you have and cycle that into the race car, which mattered, I would say, much more, right? Because if you can perform well on Sundays, you get a bigger purse, right? And as he should, obviously, not getting the sleep maybe that we need, or, our body's not feeling the best. It was at the hymns of that, but hey, we loved racing, right? We love racing, right? And that passion and that drive for racing is what kept us in it, right? Kept us driving and listen, with Carl, like I said, we stayed on the West Coast for a month. And thanks to Brendan Gaughan, he allowed us to use the parking lot of South Point Hotel to work on the race car and prepare it for the next race, right? That was the start of me touching the race car, understanding the car outside of 5 off, 5 on at the time. Okay, so yeah, no, it's just the funding side, man. But you look at it now with the driving, shucks, I'll even venture to tell you, I remember putting some of Carl's Xfinity cars on the back of a flatbed. Hopefully he don't get in trouble for me saying this. I don't think this is illegal. And taking his dually, to the next race, driving his dually to the next race, scared out of my mind, because you have $1 million vehicle in the back, and he's trusting you with all of that money, not to wreck the truck, maybe sleep deprived, and, hey, show up to the next race. But, and at the time, like you said, it was exhausting a little bit, maybe, but I will say this, we got to see a lot of the country. Right, I've had the opportunity of driving through New Mexico, the tip of Texas. I've never seen tumbleweed before. Sorry, I grew up on the East Coast, Virginia. There's no tumbleweed there. I always seen it in cartoons or TV shows or whatever. I literally saw tumbleweed for the very first time in Texas, and I wanted to take it home. But just having the experience of seeing the country in that way, stopping at checkpoints, it was fun. It was fun, living in Vegas for a month, basically. I remember I was renting with some fellow teammates, and they were concerned because they hadn't seen me for a month, but I was still sending in rent at the end of the month. And so they're like, well, he's still alive and we see him on the track, so he's okay. All right. But, it was a lot of fun. Being out in Vegas for a month. In my case, it did kind of get old because I didn't entertain the nightlife.
So let's talk about you. You bring up the aspect of actually getting to touch the car. And with these smaller teams, you did have the opportunity to work, like you said, in jobs other than just 5 on, 5 off. And then even when you're at Ganassi, you had some other non-pit crew jobs there as well. So talk a little bit about some of the other positions that you have experience in along the way that people might be surprised to know about.
Yeah. So really with NBM, Carl put us over just maintaining the pit equipment, pit box, so that's where I learned to appreciate, taking care of my pit box, right? Because now I'm blessed with people who are willing to maintain that in the off season. I don't have to do it, but then I had to do that. But every now and then, Carl would call us to help push the car on the hauler, strap it up. So I learned how to properly strap the car, in the hauler so it doesn't move, it doesn't freaking fly off of the hauler. So I learned about that, and just little, minute things, housekeeping things, keeping the car clean. Cleaning the underneath, right? Some grunt work. But again, the passion and the love for it is what kept us in that, right? And somebody has to do it. Somebody has to wipe the car down. Even at Team Penske, somebody has to keep that thing looking beautiful, right? So those were my duties with NBM. When I got to Ganassi, a guy by the name of Dave Bryan, who's the car chief on the 45 now, he took a chance with me, right? Knowing, and while I was at NBM, I was also still training at Ganassi too, right? So they were still helping me with the NBM deal and vice versa. So Dave Bryant gave me an amazing opportunity. Never owning a wrench, never going to school for mechanics. I have a film degree. Come on, right? Not knowing anything about it, just took a chance on me as Keiston, and he hired me in 2020? He hired me full time as the interior mechanic on the 42 car. So again, green is a stoplight, right? When it's green, that makes sense. Anyway, so he hired me there. So I was under the tutelage of him. A guy named Steve Wolf, who's the brother of Paul Wolf. And they started to teach me how to build the interior of a race car. At the time, Matt Kenseth was in the race car, because I think the whole situation with Kyle Larson had transpired, and so he wasn't there. So it was right after that happened. So I came in as green as I don't know what, having to learn how to build interiors. And they took me in, took me under their arms and taught me everything that, I needed to know. And so I went on for at least almost 2 years, changing tires, right? And building interiors for the 42 car, right? I did a little bit of work with the one as well when Kurt Busch, he was there also. I pretty much helped build the car that Jamie McMurray drove in, I want to say the Daytona 500, maybe 21. I think it was a Spire car, the 77, maybe, I think. Anyway,
Yeah, I remember that entry. Yep.
So that was the first chance that they gave me at kind of taking the leash off just a little bit. And so I was able to build Jamie's Daytona car, which was cool. Got to work with Jamie McMurray. Obviously being a fan of the sport, knowing who, again, Matt Kenseth is, trying to not freak out, knowing who Kurt Busch is, and Jamie McMurray, just working with those guys. So, I came in, clocked in at 6 a.m., worked on interiors, went out at about 12 o'clock, practiced with the developmental group. I still did the deals on the side, the 00, pitted that a little bit, still pitted the 66 just a little bit. 51, that's Jeremy Clements, and then the Whataburger car, fudge, I can't think of it right now. But anyway, Jimmy Means, doing those deals while I was learning how to be an interior mechanic. Worked a little bit in tear down as well. So not only was I was building the race cars in the morning, tearing them down in the afternoon. So after coming from practice and training, right, I'm going back into the shop, tearing down the race cars from the race prior. So I was getting a full-on class on mechanics, also understanding what tools I needed. So learning where the tool, we had the little tool trucks that come by. Why can't I think of the name of the tools or the brand? But learning, what wrenches I needed, understanding, the little different T-handles and, certain handles that have the little ball in, like, you got to be careful with those because that'll snap off in a screw. I mean, listen, I obtained my first toolbox and filled it up with tools. And so that was an experience. But that was from doing the stuff with Carl, NBM, to Dave Bryant giving me an opportunity at Ganassi while pitting. That pretty much covers everything when it comes to the mechanical side. And again, gaining the appreciation for, treating the pit box well during the season, because knowing that I would have to repair the dents. And then now the guys, just respecting them. Being an interior mechanic helped me to understand the schedule of those guys, because a lot of times the pit guys that come in, straight in, never having the experience, and I get it, right? They do not really understand the amount of hours that those guys in the shop put in, right? Tomorrow we have off at Penske. Those guys are still there. Mm-hmm. They're still working. Road crew will get some time off because they have to travel. But the guys that are full-time in the shop, they're working 6 to 5, right? So being engrossed in that schedule, right, allowed me to appreciate what they do as well. So yeah, no, that's that. And then going into, I want to say 2022, that's when I went back to full time as a pit crew guy, and was pitting all of college stuff, college racing, pitting their Xfinity stuff. I was on AJ Allmendinger's team. Pitted the 16 Xfinity car, excuse me, and his Cup car. And so I did that up until middle of the year, and had a little situation there, and moved on, and was picked up by Penske in July of 2022.
The schedule, you described it as easy. For any of us, it'd probably be super hard, but you also have one of the highest stress level positions in all of motorsports outside of the driver. When we were chatting, before the interview, you kind of described yourselves as you guys are like the kickers, where you can go out there and make 10 straight kicks, but everyone's going to remember the 11th one that you missed. And then with that, if there's too many misses, people can get moved around. And not saying this is why, but you've pitted the 21, you've pitted the 2, you've pitted the 38. They decided to make a change, possibly based on performance and stuff. You move over from the 38 to the 12 now. What is it like making those transitions between teams, especially, 12 or, I think at the time, 9 or 10 races into the season? And then also, while the 38's been running great, I think they could win a race this year. You just jumped right onto a championship contending car with a championship driver. What is that kind of pressure like, and how do you manage jumping between teams like that when you're called on to do so?
Yeah, you guys still have me here?
Yep.
Okay, I got a message saying they lost connection. All right. So for me, the biggest thing, and this comes from my parents, is just, whatever setting you're in, whether I was in college, high school, or now, working, in NASCAR, network, get acquainted with just about everyone in the shop, right? Don't be a nuisance or annoying, but, walk around up front, allow people to start to become aware of who you are as a person, and know what the heck is this kid's name? A lot of young guys don't spend the time to do that because we're there maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. We're in the back of the shop and we're gone. So not a lot of people know really who we are. But one thing about me is I pride myself on networking and getting to know my team, right? Up front, and my pit crew mates, right? Obviously, we see each other almost every day, but that doesn't mean we talk to each other every day, okay? Especially when you have different schedules, okay? And a lot of them have families and married, they have to go home, have kids. My biggest thing was making sure that I spoke to everyone knew who I was, and I became comfortable with them and they became comfortable with me. So when it came to transitioning, right, it wasn't very hard for me because everyone had already known me, right? Obviously being on the 2 car, being in the company for 3 years and being on their top stuff, even their backup stuff, everyone had really gotten to become aware of who I was as a person, and what I can do. So the transition wasn't bad for me, right? I did not feel uncomfortable. Jonathan Hassler, I remember him before he was the crew chief, right? And we had became good friends, okay? I worked with Paul Wolf's brother, Steve, at Ganassi, right? Because I've done a couple of races on the 22. Had to fill in Vegas when they won last year. I had that bright orange suit randomly just out there on pit road with everyone else. But knowing Paul Wolf's brother, and then making sure I introduced myself to Paul Wolf myself when I had to fill in on the 22, obviously knowing the guys there too, and then knowing Paul, Mr. Wolf, it was easy. It was a smooth transition, right? On the 38, I believe I had worked with Mr. Bergini before that, right? Just being in NASCAR, right? Because we're traveling circus, we know each other, whether you're on the same team or not in general. So just understanding them, knowing some of the guys. I work with some of the guys at NBM who's at front row now, right? So this is where that whole veteran deal comes into play, right? So when I hopped onto the front row deal, the car chief, everyone pretty much knew who I was, and who didn't, I made sure I introduced myself, right, to the owner of front row. Everyone who works in the offices and the PR, like that carried on, and that allowed me to transition to the 38 pretty smoothly, right? Even with the 2 car. Then the 21, Brian Wilson being my crew chief on the 21, and now then the 2, and then Mr. Bullins, Jeremy Bullins, it all was relative. So just being in the building and showing my face and talking to people and them getting comfortable with me and I'm getting comfortable with them, the transition was smooth for me. Like I said, but that group, they built a beautiful mansion, okay? Right? They won a championship together. Almost won 2 together, yep. Right? But, Joy, it was his time to win it again. So something about him in those even years. And even years that he wins it. And, but those guys have been together for a little bit, okay? They had established a friendship, a relationship in a way, right, as close teammates, van rides and stuff like that. And so when the move occurred, again, it was smooth for me. And for the most part, we're all professionals, okay? So we have to keep the train going, right? We have to keep the clock ticking, if you will, right? But the biggest thing for that sometimes is the morale, right, of a unit. Even me leaving the 2 or having to be moved from the 2 car, sometimes it can affect the morale, right? Especially when it's just one piece, right? It's not like the 5 crew who all got moved, right, or whatever. And then that 7 crew who have been together for a long time, they just moved into that place. It's just business as usual, right? So it was the morale that I prayed for. But again, we understand what this game can be, right? And if you listen to Stacking Pennies, not too long after that happened with Ryan, he'll tell the story. And Ryan, man, he's supported me so much, man. Even when stuff was going on with me, he kept my mental together. And so we were friends, and I made sure I gave him a call when it happened, right? And just vented to him and told him, hey, man, you guys built a beautiful mansion. I will make sure to continue to pay that mortgage, right? And just keeping that respect there between him and I, because like he said on the show, right, he's been moved on and off of that car, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, right? And that's just speaking of the Cup side, right? He's an Xfinity champion too. Let's not forget here, right? And he's had to deal with moving a lot, right? Different teams. Steve Price, I think he was at Haas, right? Seminara was at Gibbs, the rear change on the 22, right? Those guys were him and is it the front changer or rear changer on the 9? Nick Odell, those guys were known for the most wins on pit road as a pit crew with Kyle Busch on the 18. So we've all have experienced a lot of moving around, and it can affect morale. But again, we're professionals, right? And if you're a good teammate, right, which is preached at Penske, just be a good teammate. Everyone is willing to work with everyone. You start to understand that at some point, you want to establish a good relationship with everyone because you just never know when you'll end up working with them, right? So everyone welcomed me in, right? It wasn't, again, the morale probably was a little crushed, and I understand that, okay? But at the same time, no one took anything out on me, right? I didn't come in thinking, oh, I'm the guy now, I was in the 2 car, no, right? I have a job to do, okay? And again, it's fun. I enjoyed it. I'm thankful for the opportunity. But again, these guys built a beautiful mansion. Let's pay the mortgage every single weekend, right? Let's have fun, but let's keep Ryan out front, right? If they miss the setup and don't qualify well or whatever happens, right? Just like we did in Kansas. Where were we? I'm sorry, before Kansas. Help me remember. Texas. Yes, Texas. Right? We had to work to get him back up there. It takes a team. One motto that Chip Ganassi had is one team, one goal, right? So we had to come together and do the deal, right? Okay, I'm the new guy in town, for the car at least, right? But hey, I've been here before. We've been here before. Let's do what they pay us to do. Let's get them up there and keep them up front. So anyway, yeah, it was a smooth transition nonetheless. And Ryan, he gave me his blessing. I mean, he helped me. He still helps me a lot. And, definitely would have liked to take him on in that pickleball tournament. Me and Hassel were ready to go, but stacking pickles, whatever. But anyway, but no, he's been nothing less than an amazing teammate to me. And so it was smooth. It was a smooth transition for sure. And a lot of those guys, actually, I worked with on the 2-car, right? So, I was like, hey, Keiston, what's up, man? Hey, good to see you again, So, yeah, it was God worked it out how he needed to work it out. And I'm glad that I trust and have faith in him every step of the way.
So I know the pit stop times are reported a lot differently between what TV shows, between what NASCAR app shows, between how the teams measure it. But reportedly this week, the 23-11-23 team set a new record for a 4-tire pit stop at 8.09 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My impression has been that the Penske pit crew group strives for consistency and no mistakes, but aren't necessarily I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say like not on the cutting edge, but aren't like out there to like try and push the limits, because you really just don't want to make a mistake that'll put your driver behind. What do you think it's going to take to maybe catch up to some teams like that are like, man, they're flirting with getting into the 7 seconds now? Do you think it's just a matter of time before you guys kind of get to that? Or are you really focused on more on fundamentals and execution and consistency versus maybe trying to fire off an 8-second stop and then the next time you come down pit road, you make a huge mistake because you're trying to move too fast?
Yeah, well, shout out to those guys. I know a lot of those guys. Brandon Banks, I believe, the jack man on that. He used to play for the Redskins back in the day. We actually got recruited together, drafted diversity. Then there's a couple changers that's on that car who was at Penske when I first got there. Those guys work hard, man. Unfortunately, I think they got a penalty on that stop as well. But not to shun them. It's still amazing, right? It's amazing when the 77 did it, right? And the 54 did it, And in our practice, which is different than the race, we've ran mid-7s. I mean, we ran 7-second stop today. All 4 of our groups have, right? So we know what we're capable of doing. We can hit an 8.3 at the track. You have to also understand 2 setups are different, right? Some setups are some teams tend to set up more on the tighter side. So instead of me being able to rip the tire out of the hole, out of the wheel well, I have to finesse it out, right? It takes a little bit more time. The carriers and the jackmen have to ride the fender in sometimes. It just depends on the setup too. Some setups are a lot more friendlier than others, right? So teams may be able to run that stuff because they don't have to worry about rubbing a fender or missing a hang, or sometimes peg heights are different, right? Missing a peg or not getting the car up too high, right? Now we check the car. Everyone checks the car before the race. But again, when setups are a little tighter, cambers are, should be pretty consistent, but when they're, can be different in a way, right? Like that can dictate how fast you can go. Okay. But for us, we know we can run that. You've seen multiple teams run it. Again, what we preach is obviously we want to be fast on pit road, right? We want to be competitive. Okay. That's why so many moves have happened with us, and other teams, not just us. Let's not focus on us. But at the same time, again, we want to find that middle ground, right? We know how fast we can go. We know what we can push, but we also know where we can be, right? Our mental performance coach tells us all the time, beat them with fundamentals. That sounds weak, sounds soft. I don't care how it sounds. But at the end of the day, you may be good at doing a 360 one-handed dunk, but it all comes back down to a two-handed dunk, baby. all boils back down to the fundamentals, okay? And so we strive on making sure we keep our fundamentals and being fast fundamentally, being fundamentally sound, but also fast, right? So sure, the 8.3s are great. Sounds good. You put it on a cracker, right? But if we can continue to do what we do, when Blaney comes in third and he stays in third or gains a spot, comes in fourth, the fifth, he stays in that vicinity, we're doing our job. That's what we're focusing on, right? If we bust out an 8.3, great. They're not saying, guys, don't try to run the fastest stop of the weekend. Like, flipping, go for it, right? But we're not pushing that on the edge. You know, the beautiful thing about being with different teams, like practicing with different teams, Joe Gibbs is an aggressive organization when it comes to pit stops. They want to freaking run, excuse my language, balls to the wall all the time. Okay, hits. That's why they came up with that next gen stop, right? They want to just blaze in glory. They go out swinging, right? If they die on that hill. But also working with Roush. Roush is 100% fundamentals. We don't care about 8-second stop. We want it clean. Okay, I got a little bit of best of both worlds. I didn't know God was preparing me for Penske. Penske is right there in that middle. Right? So I got a little bit of aggressiveness and a little bit of fundamentals in me as well. Combined it, hello Team Penske, right? They love the fast stops. They will applaud us, throw a award banquet for it, whatever. But if we keep our driver in the same spot that he came in on the pit road with, they're just fine with that.
And we've talked on this show about this crew, and you talk about changes that have happened in the past, but there were some issues, especially on the fan side, of not liking what was going on, like in the 2020s, 2021. I felt like in 2023 that the 12 crew found what you're talking about. They found that middle ground. They found that consistency. Maybe they were only gaining one spot or holding serve every pit stop. They weren't being flashy and gaining 3 spots out of nowhere and then having a catastrophic stop, 2 stops later. And they win the championship based on that consistency, I think, because they kept Ryan in the game the whole way through. And I think, and we kind of preach that on our podcast about saying, yeah, you'll see these flashy stops from these Gibbs teams and stuff, and then you'll see something catastrophic happen that could cost them a race too. So thank you for that insight for sure. I thought that was really cool. So
for sure. And I'm not coming down on those guys. Like,
no, they're great too. Yeah.
Do your deal, man. But yeah, the more we can limit the catastrophic failures and the things like that, the better off we'll be, and more likely we'll keep our jobs. Just kick the field goal, make it, and go sit on the bench, kid.
Yeah. We you mentioned the pickleball. For those who will be listening to this whenever they listen to it, we're we're recording this basically the night after. How was your game? And you were teamed up with Hassler too, and I want to know how good is his game, or did he just pick you to make sure you had a ringer next to him and make him look good?
Oh man, Mr. Hassler. I'm just gonna tell the truth. He recruited me because of that. I'm more of the tennis. I play more tennis than I do pickleball. Pickleball's fun, but pickleball's for people who may want to play tennis possibly, but don't want to go through the whole process of learning tennis. Pickleball, the technique is not as profound as in the tennis side of things. So I tend to stay on the tennis court more than I do pickleball court. But understanding tennis always helps me to transition to pickleball. But Mr. Hassler is pretty good. Him and his wife, they actually have, I believe she was telling me, a membership at that facility, Rally Pickleball. So they play here and there. So he was pretty good. He was pretty good. We, no pun intended, we held serve. They did the scramble matches. I don't know if you guys really kept up with it, and we went 3-0 in that. So we were undefeated going into hopefully making the championship bracket, but we did not. We're a little bummed out about it, and we let Ryan know about it. I think he cheated us. So Ryan, if you're listening to this, I think he cheated us. But we're coming again. We're coming back next year if he has the charity. But no, it was fun. It was pretty cool to be able to play with my crew chief. Obviously, because through that, we knew each other before that, but you gain a little bit more of a trust, of some chemistry, outside of racing, right? Because it takes a team, right? You got to come together, put something together. You have to game plan in order to win, in order to go 3-0, right? And, and I'm not bragging on that, but I think it's beautiful. I remember Mr. Hazel and I were warming up, and it was some things I was showing him, from the tennis side that could help him, right, in our next match and so on and so forth. So, yeah, we went on and going 3-0, and that's the first time I've ever been a winner and a loser at the same time, because we didn't. Oh, I'm coming hard here, Blaney. You snuffed us, man. No, it was cool though to do that for charity, to help somebody. That's the goal, man. That's the goal, right? We're blessed to have one of the greatest jobs in the world, right? Let's give back, and that was the main goal for that, And so I'm glad we were able to achieve that last night. I don't care if we was in the championship round or not, right? It was cool seeing Brad again, Corey again. Funny story about Corey LaJoy. I was at Ganassi, and he was in the 7 or something, and he decided to come work out with us one time, right? And Trackhouse is a strictly CrossFit style team, and he was selected to be my partner, and we went through the ringer. I had him rolling, and I don't know if Corey consistently remembers my name, but he gives me a fist pump every day just from remembering the day that I kind of took him through the ringer just a little bit. But we're both going through it, but it was like, I think for him, maybe it was a wake-up call of like, yeah, we're not just, we don't just change tires. We're freak of nature, right? We're athletes. So, but no, it's good stuff with him, and then obviously Ryan Flores, they had their group, and they went on to play in the main rounds. Blaney, losing to them. We need to have a conversation. But I wanted a little piece of those pros. So the guys that actually won the tournament, I think they're legit pros, right? I wanted a piece of them. Yeah. Right? I would have told Mr. Asler, saddle up, because we're taking them head first, baby. Right?
They interviewed them beforehand, and the one guy, he was like, they asked him their strategy before the championship, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to try and hit as many balls as I can at their feet. Like, he knew exactly what he was looking to do, Yeah, they were pretty good.
He's a tennis player, I could tell, right? You can just pick him. You can pick him out. And that was my game plan, right? Because you hit slice shots, and if you are playing against people who have never played tennis, right, or don't know how to pick those shots up off of the ground, okay, they're not going to know what to do with it. Hitting inside out shots, right? A shot where he's setting up inside, but he hits the ball that way. I knew exactly what he was doing. And I was watching Brad, man, and it was like, I wish I could just coach him, because a lot of times those guys were hitting those deep balls, right? And you would run out of space. You can counter that with a slice shot. I can cut his shot off and then attack the net. But anyway, I'm not giving up my antics. I'm just saying I wanted a piece of them, just a little bit. But no, it was that was cool though, just to see some guys, come from ranks of pickleball prowess and play, and it kind of lit a fire in me, because it's like, well, if I take pickleball just a little bit more seriously, hey, I might be on the Olympic team in 2028. I think they're breaking it. So here we go. But no, it was a great event, and like you guys had mentioned off camera, it was a blessing just for Ryan to invite us out to that, right? And I made sure to thank him 1,000 times over for that. And again, I love giving to charity. I love doing something for a good reason, for pickle for purpose, right? And so that's always awesome. And with Austin, we did some stuff too. Penske has done an amazing job at, giving back, to the community. I think every organization should do it if they're not doing it. But, being a part of Penske, and even when I was with Ganassi, we would do the Ronald McDonald House, right? Because that was one of our sponsors at the time. Just being a part of organizations that are willing to give to people who don't have. I'm just going to tell you this. Obviously, we fly privately and we get some food on the plane, right? Sometimes there would be leftovers. I would take those leftovers and go into the streets of Charlotte and give it to people laying on the side of the street. If we get extra gear, extra clothes that doesn't have our logo on it, I used to do that at the Ganassi. I used to take, no one's wearing a 4X, take a big box, ask them, obviously. They would say, that's fine. They were going to throw it away or whatever, recycle it or whatever. I'm like, I'm going down to the street of Charlotte and somebody can use it as a blanket or wear it, right? Someone has wet clothes. So, I always had a giving side to me, and just being able to be a part of organizations, now Team Penske, that's willing to do that, drivers that are willing to do that. It's a blessing, man. So I was just grateful to be there amongst some legends in the game, and sponsors, getting to talk to certain people who sponsor it and who Blaney also sponsors, right? Like the brain cancer research. I hope I'm not botching their name, but it was some people that does research on brain cancer or whatever. I got to talk with them a lot, and I played them actually first, and so that's how they really got to know who the heck I was. And so we won that 11-2. But
it's UMPC sports medicine people, and they deal with brain injury.
Okay,
they're actually the people that Dale Jr. went to.
Okay.
When he had his issues, and then Ryan's dad, Dave, actually went to them too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So thank you for correcting me on that. But amazing people, right? And just mingling with drivers, and their colleagues and stuff like that. It's I can't say enough. It was an amazing time. So yeah.
So let's talk about the future.
Uh-oh.
And I have to say, you're an amazing storyteller. It's been fantastic being able to talk to you tonight. So I see a future for you in like motivational speaking, or you've mentioned it a couple of times throughout this interview. You're a film and journalism and communications graduate from college. So what do you see? You are early on in your pitting career. I think you still have plenty of really good and fast years ahead of you. But beyond that, do you see yourself in a public speaking role? Do you see yourself wanting to be on, whatever the NASCAR TV contract is at that point, whatever they're doing? Maybe it's all streaming by then. Do you want to be still in the sport, but on the broadcasting side of things? Like, what would that goal be for the next chapter in your career? Again, years and years from now.
Yeah. I mean, God's willing, however long he allows me to do this, hopefully till I'm 50. We have a couple of guys that are 50 doing this. Rear change on the 6 car, he's 48 and he's in great shape. But anyway, I would love to. I wouldn't mind stepping into the media side of NASCAR. Broadcasting would be great. I think usually most times they bring in drivers, but because drivers really see it in a broader perspective than some pit crew guys. But you have guys like Dion Williams, Rocco. You have guys like Ryan Flores. He's a person now. I mean, come on. We can do that too, right? But see, again, Ryan races as well. He's been on the mechanical side. Rocco just has that personality that just grabs your attention. So I definitely think there's a space for us to do that. And I wouldn't mind doing it, to be honest with you. But also, I really wouldn't mind working in the studios, right? Working behind cameras, producing, working as a director of photography or whatever, something of that nature. But to be very, very honest with you, working in NASCAR would be cool, but retiring from this, if I can get to that point where I can say I can retire, I honestly want to step into the film world at full time. Right now, obviously, depends on where I am in life, but like I had mentioned to you, I'm kind of working on, a voiceover career. I'm kind of learning that a little bit, learning that craft. Understanding film, I know a good portion, but that's a different world. It's a different beast. You're in front of the camera now. You're not behind it, right? So just learning that craft, and hopefully one day, being on the next Monster Inc. or I don't know, the cartoon version of Transformers, or I've always dreamed of being a Power Ranger. Don't judge me. But anyway, if they ever come out with one of those movies, it's morphin' time. Like, I've been pricing that stuff for a while. So, I really would love to work for a Marvel or Pixar, or, a Disney, one day. So, that's honestly what I would love to do post racing. But hey, if Fox comes calling or Peacock or whoever, NASCAR Studios, I'm down with that too. I've also had a dream of working for the WWE, right? And becoming a color commentator or a ring announcer. The following contest is scheduled for one fall, I mean, hey, I think I could do it, right? So that's kind of where I would like to take my career, mainly into the film world, back into the film world, if you will, after racing. Yeah.
Well, Keiston, thank you. You've gone above and beyond with giving us your time tonight. You've given us so many great insights and an inside look, at the inner workings of a pit crew, of these teams in general, from big and small, and such an interesting story. So we knew you're an athlete and everything, but you're so unique in that you came in and you came up and recruited as an athlete, but then along the way, then you still ended up in all these different roles and mechanic roles and touching the car and working on the car and stuff. So you still got the whole experience regardless of it. So that was really cool to learn about. Hopefully we get to talk to you more again in the future. But for now, thank you. Thanks for coming on to the Team Blaney podcast and talking with us.
For sure. Thank you guys again for having me and, staying attentive to my long-winded responses. But anyway, I think it was well worth it, and this was fun. This was a lot of fun. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.